All right. So we are doing our Thakur Tuesday, reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are, let me see, I'm just going to go all the way back here and then I'm going to have to go all the way forward again to find out what chapter. We're on chapter 29, the Durga Puja festival. The Durga Puja is the worship of Mother Durga, one of the goddesses. Yeah, and so they've just had that puja. Everybody is there and they've finished. And the last thing we read about last week was quite beautiful. Um, the master had just finished praying a prayer to Rama. And as we ended last week, M had said that as the master prayed, all eyes were turned toward him. Hearing his piteous voice, few could restrain their tears. And so I was thinking about that mood of how sincere and honest and really just laid open he was. And so I went up and read the prayer again, just kind of to be inspired by it. And I had a very interesting thought that I haven't really sussed it out completely, but it's kind of fun. I'll read the prayer and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking about it here. It says, "Now the master began to pray, O Rama, O Rama, I am without devotion and without austerity, without knowledge and love. I have not performed any religious rites, O Rama. I have taken refuge in you. I have taken shelter at your feet. I do not want creature comforts. I do not seek name and fame, O Rama. I do not crave the 8 occult powers. I do not care for 100 occult powers. I am your servant. I have taken refuge in you. Grant me, O Rama, that I may have pure love for your lotus feet, that I may not be deluded by your world-bewitching Maya. O Rama, I have taken refuge in you." And I read that, and I was sitting there, and the thought just occurred to me. Every time I've read that, and even as I read it now, I immediately give the voice to myself, where I'm talking to God from not a bad conscience, but a bad self-image. Like I haven't really done any devotions. I really haven't done any practice. I really haven't done this, that, or the other. And hey, this might happen a couple of times, I think. Ozzy. So oh, he's being rescued. So when I was thinking about it, though, I thought, well, what if that's not the case? Oh, because Ramakrishna is an enlightened soul. He's not under any delusion, and certainly he couldn't be here saying with any sincerity, that I'm without devotion and austerity. I mean, really, Ramakrishna without devotion and austerity? That's and so I was thinking that doesn't fit. And I was sitting there thinking, why doesn't it fit? Well, I think, Ramakrishna is enlightened. He is always telling us that we are not the doer, that we are the observer, we are the witness, and that's the ultimate reality, that we are this witnessing aspect. And I was thinking, well, what if this is Ramakrishna praying from that perspective of not being the doer, meaning he has no power to change anything, no power to exert an idea or something from himself. And he's saying that to Ramakrishna. He's praying from that perspective of being purely the witness, not being able to actually do any of these things, and paying perhaps from a position of really a complete surrender to the fact that he's not the doer, to the fact that the one without a second, is not a particular. And so he says, Rama, I'm without devotion and austerity. I can't do any of my own devotion because I'm not the doer. I can't protect myself because I'm not the doer. And all of that, I'm without knowledge and love. I've not performed any religious rites, right? Oh, Rama, I have taken refuge in you. See, that's the prayer. It's like, I cannot do anything for myself. I'm purely the witness. I'm completely helpless. I can't do what's required, even for my own salvation, even for anything, you know. And so, and because he keeps making that one most important claim: I have taken refuge in you, I have taken shelter at your feet. And this is his commitment. I don't want creature comforts. That's the body. You know, I don't want identity with the body that would cause me to seek its comforts, to seek for its pleasures, right? I do not seek name and fame. That's mind. I don't seek for the comfort of the mind, the fame that says my mind is right, the name that says I'm something, you know, that egoistic perspective. So he's denying body and mind. I don't crave the 8 occult powers. I do not care for 100 occult powers, right? I am your servant, right? I move as you movest me, right? You are the moving force, and I am the instrument. You know, you are the charioteer and I am the chariot, right? And so he goes on with all of that. I have taken refuge in you. Again, I'm taking refuge. Grant, O Rama, that I may have pure love for your lotus feet. You know, that all of this may be true, that I don't want any of these other things that split my love for you, that gives my love for you to objects, to all these things. When I believe myself to be body mind, and I want uh, to have that where is it, creature comforts. You know, when I take, I don't want that. I don't want the body mind. I don't want to be taken for creature comforts. I want to have a pure love. I don't want a love that's broken into pieces, that I love different things and different experiences, things of the body and things of the mind. I've taken refuge in you, that I may not be deluded by your world bewitching Maya, right? Deluded into thinking that I'm the doer, into thinking that I'm separate and apart from the whole, in thinking that I have a goal and will of my own, separate and apart from the divine. He says, but let me take that refuge and find that pure love, that I may not be deluded by this world bewitching Maya, O Rama. And he ends it: I have taken refuge in you. And then to hear how that prayer was received, it says, as the master prayed, all of the eyes turned toward him, hearing his piteous voice. You know, just that voice of absolute surrender, acknowledgement that I cannot take take care of anything. I can't do anything, right? Hearing his piteous voice, few could restrain their own tears. And so, you know, we talked about how that devotion is catching. You know, when we see somebody who's feeling that way, it fills us. We're moved by that. And so just to see Thakur praying this prayer from a very different perspective, possibly, I don't know that that's exactly what he's up to, but it made so much more sense and became very much more interesting to me to hear how does an enlightened soul who knows the one without a second, right? So does not have the personal God necessarily as such, or knows the unreality of even the personal God, you know, that it's impersonal in its absolute truth. To be in that state and to pray this devotional prayer while knowing the truth of that state, that you are not the doer, and how Ramakrishna really is able just to be in any and all of the yogas, you know, in any and all of the paths, and he can express them while in any of them. And so his realization, he has had that realization that God is one without a second, that he's not a particular, that he's not manifested, he's the absolute unchanging. And even in being in an ecstatic state with that knowledge, he can also inhabit the space of the devotee who is having a pure love for the divine and begging for that pure love from his chosen ideal. In this case, Ram, you know, a personal God when he's taken form, and how easily Ramakrishna can move between all of those different states and not have them conflict in him, not have the one without a second remove his devotion, right? Because he knows that one without a second can also play in the land of Shakti and take a form for him. Master, where have you been, Ram? Ram, I was upstairs. This is Ram, not Ramas. Don't get, he's not praying anymore at this point. Now we've got one of the devotees named Ram, who was upstairs. Ram had been making arrangements for feeding the devotees on the roof of the house. Master, to Ram with a smile, isn't it better to stay down below than to be so high up? Water accumulates in low land, but flows down from a high mound. Ram, that is true, sir. Now you know he's referencing that story of egoism, right? That God's grace uh, um, accumulates in the lower planes, doesn't accumulate on the mountaintop, right? And so Ram is saying that's true. And now we just get some information. Supper was ready on the roof, and Sri Ramakrishna and the devotees were taken there and sumptuously fed. Later, the master went to Adar's house with M, Niranjan, and others. The Divine Mother was being worshipped there. It had been Adar's earnest prayer that on this sacred day, Sri Ramakrishna might bless his house with his presence. You know, this eating on the roof is not an unusual thing, actually. I was talking to, you guys probably remember Kumar from the DC Center. He used to tell me that when he was young, that in his village, all the kids just hung out at all the houses. They didn't just hang out at their own house, that they could walk in and out freely of any of the houses of any of the villagers there. And that they would, you know, if you were there, they would feed you. If it was lunchtime, they would feed you if you were in that house. And he said when it got too hot to be indoors, that they would go up and sit on the roof. Like at night, they would take their bedrolls up onto the roof and lay out and sleep under the stars. And he said all the kids in the neighborhood would all sleep on the same roof together, hanging out, you know, and that's how he grew up. And I just thought, what a beautiful ideal, that old style of life that we've given up in the West. You know, because we've become very different, so mobile. Nobody knows their neighbors, moving all the time and all of that. But imagine growing up in a small little village where nobody has cars, there's no TV, there's no radio. Everybody works in the rice fields. Everybody knows the traditional roles and are deeply involved in them. And the kids running around town, just hanging out together and playing, and all the parents taking care of everybody's children. Just there's none of that division. Just an idyllic, you know, place. How whole you can grow up in that environment. How loved, you know, how secure in yourself could you grow up in that environment. And just having that blurred lines of my family, it's our family, you know, because you get to eat with everybody. Everybody's taking care of you. Everybody knows where the kids are at. It's really quite just something to look at. Monday, September 29th, 1884. It was the third day of the Durga Puja. The master had been awake in his room at Dakshineshwar since early morning. The morning worship in the Kali temple was over, and the orchestra had played the morning melodies in the Nahabat. Brahmins and gardeners, basket in hand, were plucking flowers for the worship of the Divine Mother. Bhavanat and Baburam, Niranjan and M had spent the night at Dakshineshwar, sleeping on the porch of the master's room. As soon as they awoke, they saw Sri Ramakrishna dancing in an ecstatic mood. Wouldn't that be a lovely first thing to see in the morning? You break your eyes open or roll over, and there's Ramakrishna dancing in an ecstatic dance in your room. As soon as they awoke, they saw Sri Ramakrishna dancing in an ecstatic mood. He was chanting, "Victory to Mother Durga! Hallowed be the name of Durga!" He was naked and looked like a child as he chanted the name of the blissful mother. After a few moments, he said, "Oh, the bliss of divine ecstasy! Ah, the bliss of divine drunkenness!" Then he repeatedly chanted the name of Govinda. "Oh, Govinda, my life, my soul." You can see how deeply he's feeling this, you know, just completely gone. "Oh, my life, my soul." The devotees sat on their beds with unwinking eyes, watching Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual mood. Hazra was living at the temple garden. Latu was also living there to render the master personal service. Rakal was still at Vrindavan. Narendra visited Sri Ramakrishna now and then. He was expected that day. The devotees washed their faces, The master took his seat on a mat on the north veranda. Bhavanath and M sat beside him. Other devotees were coming in and out of the room. The master to Bhavanath. The truth is, the ordinary men cannot easily have faith, but an Ishvarakoti's faith is spontaneous. Prahlada burst into tears while writing the letter Ka. It reminded him of Krishna. It is the nature of jivas to doubt. They say yes, no doubt, but, right? So this is quite an extraordinary thing for Ramakrishna to be telling us. That's the other things. Ramakrishna is praying to Rama. Ramakrishna is on record as telling the devotees, he who was Rama and he who was Krishna is now Ramakrishna before you. Right? So he's basically telling them, he who is Rama is the same as he who is me, who is Ramakrishna, is the same who was Krishna. And so he's teaching us there that this incarnation is not multiple, that it's the same God, which seems obvious when you say it that way, the same God who has incarnated each time. What is a different God going to incarnate? It's one without a second, right? And so it's always the same beloved who is incarnating, and Ramakrishna is that. Now, in a sense, it could also be ourselves, but we can't really do that, partially for what he's talking about here. We were not given that level of power. The difference between us and an avatar is in power, right? We're made of clay, just like the avatar is made of clay, no doubt. But we're made of an amount of clay that's big enough to fashion a mouse, right? And Rama is made of enough clay to form a life-sized elephant. So the difference in us is not in kind. We are the same kind. We are both made of the same materials. But the avatar brings with him the full power of that knowledge of who he is, whereas you and I have forgotten who we are, and it's very difficult for us to gather our faith and to know who we are. And so here he's saying to us, he says, well, the truth is, ordinary men cannot easily have faith. Right? And he's telling us that the reason for that is because it's the nature of embodied spirits, right, to be able to have faith or to believe that something is true. Why? Because an embodied jiva, is a soul who's been captured by attachment to the body and the mind. And so this soul never sees the whole picture and is always slightly confused because all the information about God that he gets through the senses and the mind is not always given as a consistent whole. It's being broken into pieces and being given to you as tastes, as touches, as smells, as visions, right? And from that, the mind is trying to conjure a oneness or trying to conjure an idea of the beloved, of God, of this one without a second, and is having a very difficult time with that. And so Ramakrishna is telling us, yes, it's difficult for you to have faith. Don't see that as a statement about your worth or about your success, because you also are not the doers. And we just prayed this prayer together, right? And so don't be concerned with that. And he's talking about the difference with those who are Ishvarakotis. Ishvarakotis are those who have been born eternally perfect, that the veil of Maya is very thin over their eyes. And these are the people who are usually there to help the incarnation in his Leela or her Leela, right? These are the people, these are the 12 disciples of Jesus and the 16 disciples of Ramakrishna, and the disciples of Buddha and the playmates, the gopis and the cowherders of Krishna, right? Those are the Ishvarakotis, and they have that grand faith, right? Because their veil is so thin for them. They've come and gone with the avatar many times in the past. And so Prahlada is one of those. And he bursts into tears just by seeing the letter K, because it reminds him of Krishna. It's the first letter of the word. And so he immediately bursts into tears. That's how powerful that faith is, that knowledge of what he's talking about, that connection to what he knows to be true and what he's experiencing as true. Hazra can never be persuaded to believe that Brahman and Shakti, that Shakti and being endowed with Shakti are one and the same, right? So Hazra really is seeing the difference between God and the power of God, God unmanifest, God that has no form, and God with form, when God becomes Shiva or becomes Rama or becomes Krishna or becomes Ramakrishna or Jesus or Buddha, right? It's the same thing where Jesus telling everybody, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I'm not different from the divine. I'm the Father with form, right? And so we cannot be separated. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you've touched me, you've touched the Father. I am the manifested form of God to the unmanifested form of the same God. So they are not different. When the reality appears as creator, preserver, and destroyer, meaning he steps into the world of change, meaning that he's in the relative world, he's in the world of manifested beings, right? He says, when the reality appears as the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer, we call it Shakti, right? Shakti is that divine power, the energy of God, the prana, the movement of God, the expression of anything. When it is inactive, right? When that power of God is in potential form, it's not actually doing or manifesting, we call it Brahman, but it's still not different from the manifested, right? It's like a snake that's wriggling and a snake that's laying still. They will appear as two different things, right? Because of what? We see multiplicity because of our senses, right? Like fire and its power to burn. Why do we see that as two different things? Well, because one, we sense by putting our hand near the fire and we feel the heat, but we see the fire with our eyes, right? So that gives us the impression of two things when there's only one thing, right? And so take that and add it, multiply it ad infinitum, all of the different things you've seen with your eyes, heard with your ears, smelled with your nose, touched with your hands, all of those disparate things, and you've created separate objects because they were presented to you through different avenues of information. But it was all information about the one and same thing, that one without a second. And from that delusion, by identifying with the body and getting our information about God indirectly through senses, we have then consequently created an inaccurate view of the reality and see ourselves as separate, we have created objects not only of everything else in the world, but we've created an object of our own self. And we've done that how? By placing a thought of ourself in the world of change, because the whole world is in you, right? The whole world is in your mind. That's why this is not a direct experience of reality, because your senses are experiencing reality, and then they're turning around and telling you about it. And your worldview is based on what the senses have told you about their experience with that, right? And so we step into this confusion, this not knowing. But he's saying, really, it's one and the same thing. It's indivisible. Even though the senses make it feel or look or taste or sound like it's divided, because you can see the fire and feel its heat, you get that sense of two. He says, no, that they aren't two, right? Even though the body's telling you it's two different things, it's not. It's just information about the same thing, a singularity. Fire naturally brings to mind its power to burn, and the idea of burning naturally brings to mind the idea of fire. It is impossible to think of the one without the other. That's his demonstration. The other thing he talks about is milk and its whiteness. If I say the word milk, you automatically see the whiteness of milk, right? And so he's saying, you see how we know inside that they're not separate, because we can't think of one without thinking of the other. So we know that in reality, he's using that argument anyway, to demonstrate that we know in our core that they're the same thing, that there's only one there. But in our deluded self, our image of self that's within the mind, the changing world, that self doesn't know. So I prayed to the Divine Mother. Now this is interesting, you know. So um, uh, he's working through the manifested world as we all are, and so he's praying to the Divine Mother because technically you can't pray to Brahman, right? Because Brahman is that one without a second. In Brahman, there's no you. Brahman is not personal. He's not manifested. So he doesn't have attributes. He doesn't have an ear that you can pray to. He doesn't have a face that you can kiss. He doesn't have shoulders that you can embrace and hug. Right? Brahman is everywhere present, equally, everywhere, all the time, in all things and beyond. Right? And so there's no way to relate to Brahman because Brahman is not
Swami, question.
relative. Yes.
Is there an equivalent in Judaism and Christianity of Brahman?
Yes, although it's not well developed. If you read through, they will often talk as the Father as being unchanging. There are songs about him in the Psalms of being the unchanging one, right? And there in Jesus, in that the first paragraph of John that we read, chapter 1, it said, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God." So word is the vibration. Word is the manifested God. And that's how God becomes word, becomes Jesus, manifests as the personal God. God becomes word, manifests, right? And then came and dwelt among us and taught us about the oneness, right? Taught us about the oneness because in Matthew 17, when Jesus is praying in the garden, just his last prayer, his final prayer on the planet, is for our unity. He's praying to the Father and he's saying that
But you can't pray to Brahman.
well, in that sense, I mean, that's why I say it's not developed in the same way in Christianity because the Father also takes on attributes. And we see this in the Old Testament when in Exodus, when Moses wants to see God, he prays to the Father, "Let me see you." And the Father says, "Nobody can see me and live," right? Because that's just the way that is. I don't know all the reasons in it, but nobody can see me and live, meaning nobody can see me and remain separate, right? Because I'm not separate. And so what he does is he says, "I'll tell you what I'll do. When I pass you, I'm going to pass you and get in front of you. You hide in that cleft of the rock right there. And as I pass you, I'll put my hand over you so you do not look at me. And when I am past, then look up from behind the cleft of the rock and you can see me from the back." All right. I'll give you that ability to see me from the back. And so he does that. And so, yes, they play with the same ideas in Christianity and Judaism. They reference the same ideal that it's the Father, the unchanging, that becomes word, begins to act, begins to vibrate, manifest, and then he becomes the incarnation, and then the incarnation dwells among us, and we use the incarnation as our handle to pick up the pot of God and fill ourselves with it. Right? So God must manifest in order for us to relate to her. And so she does that by taking a body and dwelling among us so that we can know what love is. We can learn about a divine love.
Thank you.
Yeah. So he says, when the reality appears as creator, preserver, destroyer, which are the three aspects of this manifested world, we call it Shakti. We call it power. When it is inactive or in pure potential form, we call it Brahman. But really, it is one and the same thing, indivisible. Fire naturally brings to mind its power to burn, and the idea of burning naturally brings to mind the idea of fire. It is impossible to think of one without the other. So I prayed to the Divine Mother, "Oh Mother, Hazra is trying to upset the views of this place," right? Because he's insisting that they're separate, that they are two different things, that the manifested goddesses and gods are separate and different from Brahman, from the unmanifest. And Ramakrishna is saying no, and it's his place, it's his ashram, and he's praying to the Divine Mother, say, we got a problem. This guy's here saying that you're different, from the unmanifest, and they're messing everything up, right? Oh, Mother, Hazra's trying to upset the views of this place. Either give him right understanding or take him from here. Yeah, it's like either give him right understanding or take him out of here. He's confusing people. He's giving them wrong information about you, right? The next day he came to me and said, so this is the next day, uh, Ram comes to Ramakrishna and says, yes, I do agree with you. He said that God exists everywhere as the all-pervading consciousness. So Ramakrishna's prayer had its effect. Mother gave Ram the right view so he could see more clearly. Or Hazra gave Hazra the right view. Bhavanath, smiling, did what Hazra said really make you suffer so much? Master, you see, I'm now in a different mood. I can't shout and carry on heated discussions with people. I'm not in a mood now to argue and to quarrel with Hazra. Hriday said to me that Jadu Malik's garden house, Uncle, don't you want to keep me with you? No, I said. I am no longer in the mood to get into heated arguments with you. Right? So it's interesting. Ramakrishna goes through quite a few of these moods as he's doing different practices. There was a time where he was driven to absolute integrity. So he remembered one night he went to bed and remembered that he had told the neighbor that he was going to come and visit him. And he said, oh my gosh, if I go to bed now, I never went to visit the neighbor and I'm a hypocrite. I said I would do something I didn't do. So he gets up in the middle of the night and he walks to the neighbor's house. Now, in the village, India, there's not doors on the houses. Well, some houses have doors, but many of the houses, many of the mud huts, will just have a curtain on the front of the door. And so it says that he went to the neighbor's house and he pulled the curtain aside and took his big toe and just touched it on the inside of the door frame so that he could say that he had gone to his friend's house, to his neighbor's house, and then he goes back home and climbs into bed and goes back to sleep. And so, as Mother was teaching him different aspects, she would put him in these moods, where there was a thing where could only tell people the truth. He couldn't cover it even in a nice way to make an unpleasant truth, nice, or to fib a little, a white lie, we call it, a little white lie where you just sort of don't say the thing directly. Well, he went through a period where he couldn't do that. He had to be absolutely truthful to people. And when the lesson was learned, and the message was given to him, then that mood would dissipate, and he would move on to the next thing. And so that's what he's talking about here. He says, no, I'm not in the mood to argue. I'm not going to deal with Hazra. It's not where I'm at right now. I'm in a different place. And I'll leave that to the mother. Mother can deal with Hazra, right? And because that faith was real, Mother immediately deals with Hazra, but deals with Hazra in a very beautiful way, gives him the knowledge he needs to not mess up the ashram, the unity of the ashram. What is knowledge and what is ignorance? A man is ignorant so long as he feels that God is far away. He has knowledge when he knows that God is here and everywhere. All right. So this is our ignorance, right? It's not, we always talk about this from our own perspective, that I think I'm separate and apart from God, right? So we speak in that way. But he's saying the real thing, right? There is no you to be separate from God, right? So he says a man is ignorant so long as he feels that God is far away, right? Because God exists. You can have an opinion about God and where he is. You can't have an opinion about you and where you are. I mean, you can, but you are a pretense, right? God is empowering your body. He moves you through love, right? And so you see things because you've identified with body, you don't know yourself as spirit. So when God shows you something, through the senses, you fall in love with it. You become attached to it, right? You see another body. Oh, and it's a pretty body. Oh, and it's a gendered body. Oh, and it's the right gender for me. to like, oh, and look how young they are, or look how old they are, or look how fat or skinny they are, right? All of those things we see from our delusion. And so he's saying that's ignorance. But the real ignorance is that you think that God is far away from you. That's the problem. And in saying so, betraying our secondary problem, the fact that we blame ourselves for this, that we make ourselves unworthy, that we make ourselves, that we have left, that we are not worthy, that we have noisy minds, we can't focus, we can't concentrate, right? But Ramakrishna would tell you, no, that's not the case. There is no you, right? There is no you to have done anything wrong. You are the same witness that I was earlier, that I am now, who is praying to God for devotion because I get everything from the beloved. I have no hands of my own, right? I have renounced them. I do nothing of my own. Just like Brother Lawrence. Remember, Brother Lawrence said, I won't even pick up a piece of straw from the ground if I'm not absolutely sure it's the will of my beloved, right? He will not act. He will not take an ego self and express it in the world, manifest it in the world. He's like, I am God, God alone. God moves through me. I do not do anything of my own, right? And so this is how we fix that problem of thinking that it's our fault, right? And come in more into a better alignment with the truth of the matter, understanding we're not the doer, and surrendering our imagined doing, which is what creates the ego, to surrender that, let that die, so that it's no longer I who live, but it's the divine principle. In the words of Paul, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me, right? The ego self, the self that makes a doer of the non-doer, dies. It's dead. And then I manifest God, not as an act of will, but as a spontaneous expression of the inspiration I feel in the presence of myself as the divine, as the beloved. So I have surrendered my will, which would block that. I've surrendered my ego, which would confuse me in that, and would make me take responsibility and take the feelings of my inadequacy and my shame and my whatnots, and spin me deeper into separation, right? So when you're sitting there thinking about how awful you are, that's not a sign of humility. That humility is not going to get you anywhere, because it's humility based on lies, right? Because you are not any of those things. What are you? You are Satchitananda. That's the only thing that's true about you. You can say, I am love. I'm loving. I am wise, and I am. That's all you can say about you, right? But those three attributes are the divine principle. Those are the battery that is God, that he places within you when, boom, he gives you a sense of being, right? A sense of existence, right? And immediately you take that sense of existence and you attach to the closest things, your body and your mind, and then carry on that way, right? So we get caught up. And so understand that your ignorance is not that you are separate from God, which is a way of saying it, but it's a self-centric way of saying it. So it's an unhelpful way of saying it. Rather, your delusion in this world is not that you can't attain God, but your delusion is that God is far away from you, when the fact is, God is here and everywhere. God cannot separate from me, because I would simply disappear, right? We know that God, we've talked about God, the verb, right? And us, the verb, and God, the noun, right? God, the absolute unchanging, is the noun of the divine principle, because there's no movement there, there's no action there. So he's the noun of the divine principle. So God is not loving. God is love itself. God does not exist. God is existence itself, right? God is not intelligent. God is intelligence itself. When God manifests, when God becomes Word, then God, as Jesus, as Rama, as Buddha, is loving. The noun can now act, right? We are the verb of God's noun. That's why he has placed that noun of himself within us, that divine image. You know, God, we are created in the image of God. God has taken that image, right? We've been kind of, you know, in the West here, we don't have many enlightened souls, so we think that when God made us in his image, that means God has a nose and hair and hands and feet and all of that. And we say, oh, that's what God is, and that's where that anthropomorphic view of God comes from, right? Because we don't understand what is God. God is a divine principle. He is Satchitananda. And that Satchitananda, that love, that wisdom, and that being are the image that he has placed within us and then turned us on by doing so. And now we become the expression of God, right? And so we want to purify the mind, which is to remove that idea of separateness, remove that idea of me and mine that's separate from the beloved, and then come to a space we are no longer living according to the thoughts of self, which drive us to run after hungers and thirsts. We no longer live chasing things. We now live in a silent space of knowing, and we are moved through inspiration. An inspiration that we now are aware of because we are looking to the love within us. We're looking to the wisdom within us, and we're doing it through our being. In that, we now become the beloved, right? That oneness, that sweetness. And so,
Swami,
yes.
Swamiji, yeah, this is all very different than Shankara. I mean, what Ramakrishna is talking about here is much more of a qualified non-dualism, don't you think, Swami?
Well, now Ramakrishna didn't teach any of the three classifications as being
Right,
true. He said they're all
right,
true. So
right,
yes, right now he's definitely talking from a qualified non-dualistic
right,
perspective because
right,
that's where he's standing. He's recognizing himself as a person.
right,
He's
right,
recognizing God as something
right,
separate, but he's a part of God. So it's
right.
qualified non-dualism.
Yeah,
But
which,
he's
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah. I mean, right. And I think that's really, really cool. I
It
mean,
is, yeah, and it's the answer to an age-old argument that's happened in Vedanta philosophy for tens of thousands of years, because they had this idea that non-dualism,
right.
qualified non-dualism, and dualism were three separate and contradictory truths, and
Hmm.
only one of them could be true, and they've been fighting over it for thousands of
I
years.
know, I know.
And then
Yeah.
Ramakrishna comes along and says, "You silly boys and girls."
Right, right,
They are not different. They are vantage points.
right.
When you believe yourself to exist separate from God, the world is dual. You, by necessity, have placed God and all things outside of yourself and will live a dual life. If you get some spirituality, you'll start to get some notion of inspiration in this world, and you begin to see God as the whole and you being a part of God, right, as you grow. And when you reach that perspective, that's qualified non-dualism. And it is real for
Yes,
you
it is.
at that point.
Yes.
And then he says, then you continue to practice and you go into samadhi and you have the ultimate experience of one without a second. Now you are in Advaita Vedanta. You are that one without a second. There is no duality. There is no other. There is one.
The ultimate truth is the non-dualism.
The ultimate reality is non-dual, is Advaita.
Okay.
But when God steps into the game, because Ramakrishna is very adamant about saying, yes, that is the ultimate reality, but it is not the only truth,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? It's like, yes, that's the ultimate reality, but the word in John, in that first verse, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, right?
Right.
That means separate from God, but with God. So there was the potential for a duality. And the Word was God,
Mhm.
which means in that state, before the manifestation of Word,
Mhm.
they were one.
Mhm.
but then God moves, God expresses, God activates some potential,
Mhm.
and something appears.
Mhm.
And now the world is in fact dual.
Mhm. And Swami, there's not really, I don't think there's not a hierarchy, is there? There's the ultimate, but there's really not a hierarchy. Do you
No,
think from
no, it's
Ramakrishna's
just,
perspective?
yeah, I mean, you could talk about it in those terms, but Ramakrishna doesn't.
Yeah, but a lot of Advaitins do. They say
Yeah,
theirs
oh
is
yeah,
the,
oh,
and I
advice.
have
Oh,
issues
yeah.
with that. And, you know, and Sarvapriyananda talks about that too.
Well, maybe you have issues with it because you're a bhakta, right?
Right, I'm with the Sheshanandaji.
And
I
God,
mean,
God
yeah,
has to appear, and how dare you
yeah,
say that? That. Yeah,
right,
no, no. This is egoism. Egoism in us is what makes us want to be right.
right. Okay,
And we
yeah,
want
I know.
our
Okay,
path to be the right path, and that's just
but
egoism.
but I
But
think it's
Ramakrishna
very
explains,
important. This is
yeah,
very, because Nikhilananda was much more of an Advaitin, the man who translated this book, right?
yeah. Well,
Don't you,
the
from what
truth.
I've heard?
Yes, no, yeah,
So
absolutely.
I,
All of us are all followers of Ramakrishna are Advaitins in our essence because we believe that to be the highest reality, the highest truth, right? But at the same time, like Ramakrishna, who is the
Mhm.
very essence of Advaita,
I was
right,
exactly,
is talking to the Divine Mother all the time.
exactly. This
And
is,
he's
yeah.
not talking to a ghost. He's not talking to
Mm-hmm.
a shadow. She's
Mm-hmm.
standing there in the room before
Mm-hmm.
him, talking to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he makes the point that wherever you are, that reality for you is real.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you're making up some man-made friend in the sky, imaginary person who makes you feel good about things. He says,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that. And that's how we think about it, because that's why reading Advaita scriptures is not
Yeah.
healthy for a bhakta,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it undoes his devotion by making him think that he believes a lesser truth. Oh, wait, there is no God. God is one without a second, right?
Yeah. Right. That's, yeah,
And,
that's been my issue with all this. Yeah.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
he creates a thing in his mind
Mm-hmm.
about the difference.
Right. And
And
then
he
don't,
loses.
yeah.
Yeah, because
Just,
Ramakrishna, Vivekananda says about the two of them, but he says about himself and Ramakrishna, he says Ramakrishna outside was all bhakti, all dual.
mm-hmm.
He loved mother, he loved God, absolutely. That's how he always went into samadhi. Now, interestingly enough, it was his duality, his love for mother, that would lead him into samadhi, the experience of one without a second.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. Right. I mean,
But
yeah.
in that state, he's never speaking.
Right.
Because he cannot
Right.
speak, because he does not
Exactly.
exist.
Exactly. That's
That's,
really a good point, Swami. Yeah.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
dissolved into the one without a second.
Right.
And you
Right.
see, when he's in an ecstatic mood, right? That's a lower samadhi. When he's in an ecstatic mood, he can speak.
Mm-hmm.
And he often speaks to the crowd
Mm-hmm.
in the room and
Mm-hmm.
to the Divine Mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So he can have that qualified non-dualism where he can see God as separate as the devotees and see God separate as herself,
Mm-hmm.
right? But yet know the reality of both of them by addressing both of them.
Right.
Right. And so it's a dance.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it is a dance, but it's important. I think, yeah.
very important.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's
it,
very
and
important.
yeah.
Because quite often one of the problems with Advaita in the West is Westerners love Advaita because it gets rid of that pesky idea of God, right? And so people are all about Advaita. Oh, good, we can get rid of that wicked witch and not have to deal with her anymore.
Right. Right.
Wonderful. But that's the first mistake of a Westerner when they approach Advaita, because in Advaita, it is not God that disappears.
Mm-hmm.
It is you that disappears,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it is, we don't get rid of that pesky God. What we get rid of is that pesky ego self that lied to us all these years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's interesting, Swami. Thank you.
Yeah. So when a man has true knowledge, he feels that everything is consciousness, right? We see that as children, right? Ramakrishna uses the example of a little boy, who's trying to catch a grasshopper, and the leaves are fluttering. The dried leaves are making noise on the ground. The little boy turns to the leaves and says, "Shh." I'm trying to catch the grasshopper, right? So Ramakrishna uses that as an example that we, in our pure mind, in our pure selves, we know that everything is conscious. Everything is consciousness. We talk to brooms. I know there's not one of you who hasn't gotten mad at a broom or a vacuum in your life, right? I know that there's not one of us that has had something happen and thrown something across the room out of frustration with it and say, how dare you disobey me like that, right? Of course, we've all done this because in our hearts, we know all things are conscious, are made of consciousness, right? That the truth of this nature is one without a second. Right? And what's the relationship between consciousness and one without a second? Consciousness is duality. Awareness is Advaita. So awareness with objects in it is consciousness. Transcend those objects, know their non-reality by knowing them to be the dream, that they belong to the dreamer, right? Then you know that there is one without a second, right? You know that God, the dreamer, is what became all of the things in the dream. When you're in the dream, it's dual. You see all those objects in the dream. You see the people, the mountains, the water. You see everything. You're like, oh, these are all things. And there's a narrative going on here and I have to play my part, right? But in the morning, when we wake up, we don't worry about what happened in the dream because we know nothing happened. We know it to be unreal. So we are taught about this progression every day. Right? Mother puts us into sleep, and in sleep, we see exactly what the real world is. That it's a figment, a play of mind, where the sleeper becomes everything and then interacts with it as being separate from itself and lives a narrative. But that's not the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is waking up in the morning and understanding that nothing happened in that dream. Literally nothing happened. No houses were built, no fires burned. It just was an illusion of a play. That when you wake up, you're just yourself and nothing else. There are no multiples. And so Mother shows us this every single day. She's training us constantly to understand who we are. What is it in you that transfers from the waking state, leaving that body behind, leaving that job behind, leaving that wife and kids behind, leaving that set of memories and monies and responsibilities behind, literally forgetting everything about it, and then steps into a new body in the dream, steps into a new world in the dream, has its own memories that are from the dream, has its own activities that are from the dream, right? So what is it that is you in the dream and is you when you're not in the dream? It is the you that does not do, right? It's the you that is not identified with the body, because that it can identify with the waking body, then it can enter into sleep and slip in and identify with the dream body. And we know from Sri Nisargadatta that they're not two different things. Normally we call those three states, the waking state, the dream state, and the turiya, the beyond both state, deep sleep state. But Nisargadatta, when he talks about it, he calls it the waking dream state, the dream state, and that deep sleep state. So the nature of the world when you're awake and the nature of the world when you're sleeping are not different. That dream world does not have any less reality than the world you are perceiving right now. Because the world you are perceiving right now, you are perceiving, just like in the dream, a secondary manifestation, right? You cannot see what your eyes see. Your eyes see the thing itself. They interpret that into information and put it on the wire, put it on the nerve. And the nerve comes to the brain and gives that encoded information to the brain. And the brain then creates a symbol for what the eye is seeing, places that in your mind and says, this is what the eye is seeing. But you unify it with the outside world and think, I'm seeing something real. but you are not. You cannot have a direct experience of the world, because the world as an object of experience does not exist. The only time you get a direct experience is in realization. The only time. In realization, when God appears, he does not appear in front of your eyes so that it gets interpreted into the instrument of the mind and then presented to you as a symbol of God. When God appears to you in samadhi, it is a direct perception. It is the sole reason that you will never forget the experience and that experience will never diminish. That's how you know that it's real. That's how you know that it's not just a phantom or a fantasy or a vision or a dream. You know it's real because when it happens in a higher resolution, in a greater sense of reality, because there's nothing like it. You know, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. It will change you utterly. You will never be able to forget it. And that's why once you've realized God, you never get deluded again. You can see both sides of the coin, you know, just like that illusion on the page when they draw that thing that in one, when you're looking at it, it looks like it's a like it's a lampstand, right? And then they tell you there's two faces there, and you're like, there's not two faces there. I just see the lampstand. But then one day you'll see the two faces looking at each other. You know, it just depends. If you make the lampstand the foreground, then it's a lampstand. But if you make the foreground the background, then the black on each side of the lampstand becomes the foreground and becomes the two faces looking at each other, right? And so once you've seen it, once you've seen both possibilities, then anytime you look at it, you can see both possibilities. You're no longer deluded. But when you see only the lampstand, you're sitting there trying to see the two faces. You're like, I can't see the two faces, right? Then you're stuck. Oh my gosh, it's 6:30. Time to go. So it's like that. When you realize God, it never goes away. But you are never again convinced about the reality and the separateness of the world. You can see them both at the same time. That's why Ramakrishna can talk to the Divine Mother and slip into samadhi and go back and forth between the two with no problem of faith whatsoever. No conflict of ideology or knowledge whatsoever. Right? All right. So we'll stop there.